Hello, 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 everybody. You know what? I got caught up listening to jazz music and I totally forgot about you in the audience. No, just kidding. We were just having some technical challenges, but it's okay. It is Wednesday. It is a beautiful Wednesday here in Toronto, Canada. If you are in Canada, let us know how you're doing. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And of course, I have the songs of Calabash. This one is from Whence We Came. And listen, I don't own the rights to the song, but I have permission to play the song. But guess what? The person who's giving me permission to play the song is on the show tonight. That is Anthony Pierre. He is the founder of Calabash. Yes, 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 yes. So this show is really going to be off the chain because I have four amazing men on the show tonight. I'm going to try my best not to cry tonight. Can't promise you because I'm just emotional about this show all day. So I hope you've taken the time when we had a delay to get yourself comfortable. You need to grab a notepad tonight because this show is going to be epic. It's going to be off the chain because of the men that I know and the wisdom keys that they're going to drop. Share, share, share. You know what? Sharing is caring. So, for those of you who don't know me, welcome to the Victory Speak Show Inspired Conversation Series. And I am your host, Nicole Karen Virginia Waldron. You got all the names tonight. And I am your voice of victory and your mental fitness coach. And I'm on a mission, people, to inspire you to live a life of victory, a victorious lifestyle. Now, for those of you who don't know, this show was born out of my natural advocacy stance and desire to amplify the story of others. I want to create inspiring conversations for you with everyday experts, unsung heroes, and thought leaders that will empower not just myself, but all of us. These are the people I call the iron sharpeners because, as you know, iron sharpens irons. Individuals that inspire and mentor us to be our best self. And I've recognized that no matter the type of conversations that I've had, good, bad, funny, you name it, there is inspiration in it. It's all about your perspective. Tonight, I want to introduce you to a group of my iron sharpeners. These men have and continue to impact my life in a positive way and the life of so many. We are going to change the narrative because you know what? For far too long, there have been false and negative stereotypes about Black fathers that have seeped into society, and we got to stop it. This show is dedicated to my grandparents, John Donald Waldron, Daddy Lawrence, and my father, Mark Waldron. I also dedicate this show to the men who showed up for me and for the godfathers of my son. One who is officially with us tonight, that is Mr. Quammie Williams. And those two that are not able to be with me tonight are Mahindi Masai and Hugh Williamson. I also dedicate this show to the fathers that are here on the show, Anton, Anthony, Dwayne, and Quammie. And to all you fathers, Black fathers out there that are showing up, this show I dedicate to you. So let's get the ball rolling. My guests tonight are a multifaceted group of fathers, and I have to share with you their bios so that you can just get a little glimpse into who they are. Anton James is a market specialist, a producer, a host, and an award winning business leader with over 20 years' experience delivering business solutions for clients across diverse sectors, working in a range of industries and environments. He is a change agent known for developing innovative strategy and business solutions to drive growth and long term profitability for clients in startups, corporate, and technological sectors. He was also invited to the United Nations in Switzerland to advise on how to compete in the global market. He has also been involved with the music production for over 25 years. His music company, First Line Productions, produced a diverse array of concerts, corporate events, weddings, and soirees, including he has worked with artists such as Washington Savage, Take Sis, Kim Burrell, Tone, Mary, Woo, Fred Hammond, CC Winers, just to name a few. And in addition to his career and business involvement, he has remained dedicated to his community, volunteering with local youth groups, sports leagues, and choirs. He is going to be followed by the amazing Anthony. We call him Tony Pierre, and he is an island son. Having been born and educated in Trinidad and Tobago, that's where I'm from, y'all. He relocated to Toronto, Canada for a post secondary education and graduated from York University with a degree in computer science. He has spent a long professional career in the field of information technology. On the artistic side, as a child of the musical Pierre family in Port of Spain of Trinidad and Tobago, Tony studied classical piano from the age of 8. He was always drawn, however, to the rich folk and popular music of the Caribbean, and by his late teens began playing pan with one of Trinidad's top steel bands, Silver Stars. Now, after migrating to Canada, that passion for music led him to perform with Toronto's top steel bands, to act and play percussion and keyboards in theater and folk ensembles, and to perform on keyboards in dance bands, all part of the rich world music culture in Toronto. Tony now leads his own jazz sextet Calabash as a percussionist and is always happy to sit in with percussion ensembles like Toronto's Rumberos, Samba Squad, Caribbean folk ensembles like the Heritage Singers and La Petite Musicale, Caribbean music groups like Mocha and Shak Shak. Anthony and his wife Joan have one daughter, Kathy, who they have supported in her pursuit of a career in the performing arts. Next up on the Victory Speak show tonight is father, husband, producer, poet, writer, and editor, the multifaceted Dwayne Wellington Rattray. He serves as co-pastor at the Durham West Worship Center in Pickering, along with his volunteer duties on the team of chaplains for the Markham Stouffville Hospital. He is a clergy officiant with, sorry, officiant with and Chapel Ridge Funeral Homes. He's the administrative liaison for the Church of God of Prophecy, managing over 30 churches and co-executive producer of Let's Talk TV. Dwayne has held positions as communications advisor with the Parliament of Canada and the Senate of Ottawa. He has also worked as a television talk show producer, writer, and editor with Silver Trust Media. He has held positions as writer and editor of various print and electronic magazines, including some of Toronto Black Weekly News magazines, the Caribbean Camera, Pride News Magazine, Planet Africa Magazine, Destiny Magazine, and Influence Magazine, to name a few. The mentor and motivational speaker has served as a military police with the United States Army for almost a decade and is currently pursuing a Master of Divinity degree, pastoral ministry at Tyndale University and Cemetery. He has 2 children, Nathaniel and Aaliyah, and currently resides in Markham with his beloved wife, Carol. And last but not least is the amazing Rudy Quammie Williams. He is a community activator and connector. He is a mentor to youth, community businesses, organizations, and individuals. He is a business consultant and facilitator with a passion for nonprofits, entrepreneurship, and small business. Quammie has a long history of service to the public through his work in various levels of government and in a number of community serving organizations. In addition to his love of business and dedication to creating strong, qualified leadership, Quammie is a multidisciplinary artist who specializes in the use of arts and culture in African-centered learning opportunity. He has dedicated his career to, amongst other things, the re-education of the African Canadian community on the value of their ancestral instrument, the drum. In addition to his study of African and Caribbean drumming tradition, Quammie is a graduate of York University Fine Arts and MBA programs and has contributed his skills and knowledge of the drums to the music of Joe Seeley, Judy Mowat, the Parachute Club, Martha and the Muffins, Dr. John, and many others. He is a co-founder of Yusufiri Sankofa, Baradanumba, and 3 ensembles dedicated to educating, entertaining through the presentation of African and African diasporic music and dance. He is the curator and co-owner of Adinkra Farm with his wife Janelle Scarrett, a land-based opportunity to provide pathways for community to claim, build, and grow. He is the father of 5 biological children, and we know in this community, he is godfather to over 20. Now, I know that was long, but I had to give you context because these men are no joke. And I want you to see the amazing background of who they are. Now, this conversation may have four parts to it, and all's not going to be tonight because we need to touch on the early years, co-parenting hacks, the history of Black fathers, women, and supporting Black fathers. And so we're just going to start tonight by let's start with honoring them, give them your flowers, give them a round of applause. I certainly am. And welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome these great men to the stage. And we know one thing, I'm just going to put it out there to you. Quammie is all the way up in the bush, as we call it. And because he's in the bush, he's having a little bit of technical challenges tonight. So, Anthony, how are you doing tonight?
Hanging in, just getting through the pandemic.
And how are you making it through the pandemic? What have you learned through this pandemic?
What have I learned? How absolutely selfish human beings can be. That's been the big lesson. Selfish human beings who want to talk about individuality in the middle of a pandemic, when it should be all about, the corporate us instead of me first. Yes. I want to be independent. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't, so human selfishness.
That has been the bane of my challenges as well, because I can't understand why people can't see the holisticness of what we need to do to come together as a community and to grow. And we would get through this pandemic a lot faster if people would stop being so darn selfish. I agree. Okay, Mr. Dwayne Wellington Rattray. I should call you Pastor now, but I know you as Dwayne. So, DW, how are you doing tonight, and how are you handling the pandemic?
Dwayne is fine.
How are you handling the pandemic?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. So one day at a time. I'm now more than ever before. Even though as you mentioned, I'm a pastor. So even as a pastor, even though we don't have in-person services, I am still much more busy than normal. Running it one day at a time.
And so now Dwayne, you're now having technical difficulties. You need to check your Wi-Fi. I'm telling you, this show is going to be lit because we're talking about fathers and we're changing the narrative. Mr. Williams, can you hear us tonight?
I can hear you. I am not so sure you can hear me.
We can hear you. We can hear you. How are you doing?
My audio is really bad. I spent all day working on this medium, so I'm a little surprised, to tell you the truth. I can't figure out what it is, but we'll make the best of it, the best we can. You may have to put some of your questions in the chat for me so that I know.
Okay, what it is because we're talking about Black fathers and celebrating them. That's what it is. That's what it is. Anton James, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing really good. Busy, tired, but that's the life of as a life of a Black man out there. But I'm blessed.
What have you learned about yourself in this pandemic? How is this pandemic treating you?
The pandemic is an interesting time. It really is refocused, priorities. It's really focused what's really important. Prior to, lifestyles was so moving, going, and it really got you to be a little more introspective and try to really look and say, listen, when all is said and done, are you content? Are you content in all things? Are you happy in all things? How have you? What do you focus on? Where do you go from? If it continues like this, what do you maintain? So it gave a good opportunity for introspective looks. It gave an opportunity to plan, understand, and just get back to the basics. Sometimes coming up here, our forefathers came up here and so forth, and people looking for something better. Sometimes they don't recognize what they were going to, what they went back to is so much better. So this has really just refocused my.
I love it. And Quammie, here's what we're going to do. If this is not working for you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call you on the phone and I'm going to use my mic as your audio. We can still hear the conversation and you can still talk through us because we need your input in this tonight. And Dwayne, we got a little bit cut off when you started giving your answer about how you were handling the pandemic and what has happened for you. So if you don't mind giving us back that again.
No worries. Thank you, Nicole. So I'm at one day at a time. I am busy now more than I ever have been. Many people say, "How is it that you're so busy?" Because the church doors are physically closed. But technology, as we're seeing tonight, is no joke, and so I'm being challenged and stretched there, learning new things and making sure that I'm a regular attendee at the University of YouTube. So I'm handling at a time, making sure that I maintain my sanity and take time for me.
So as I have you here, how has that, the pandemic, and you're here in Toronto and your children are in the US, how has that affected you as a father? That distance that you can't travel to go see them.
It's interesting that you say that because you're absolutely right. Before the pandemic, I traveled at least 2 or 3 times per year, and they would travel 2 or 3 times per year here in Canada. It has been challenging, but the good thing is the same medium that we're using now and the same medium to which the children are accustomed online, we have utilized that as far as Zoom calls are concerned, WhatsApp. I have had to join some social media things that they're on because they don't respond to text very well. So it's challenging. The good news, though, to piggyback on what you were talking about, Tony, is that having been on my jobs, I am actually traveling within the next couple of weeks. So that's a good thing.
Yes, that is a good thing. And so, Mr. Williams, let's go to you for a second. Well, no, I don't have Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams just moved out of the camera zone. I'm gonna go back to you, Tony. Tell me what it was like for you growing up in Trinidad. A black man, because it's a different country growing up in Trinidad as a black man. What were your early years like for you growing up in Trinidad?
In I was thinking of that the other day, and I actually looked and said, I didn't even realize how middle class or almost upper middle class I was when I compare when I look at the comparison with even Canada today. So really my childhood was really special. I just told Joan the story that as a little kid, my father was managing a facility that was really close to the water. And I remember having maybe at age 4 or 5, having a pedal car. And I have a huge scar on my knee from once falling into the sea with that car. I tried to park it on the edge of the water like I saw the guys driving and park. And my car didn't stop. And the only reason I'm here is a sea scout who was about 100 yards of the way pulled me out of the water. So but it made me remember that, hey, at 4 years I had a pedal car. That's like in the Caribbean in the 50s. So maybe I was more middle class than I thought. I always thought that, well, I came from a struggling family. To us it was struggling. But when I look at it in retrospect, I had a really fantastic childhood. I knew most of my grandparents and so on. And I had a remarkable mother, like all Caribbean mothers, and I can't complain. As a kid, I had a fantastic childhood up through my teens, and into secondary education. So I would say I had a great childhood. Trinidad was much less dangerous than it is now as a society. There wasn't the amount of crime and so on. And as kids, we were free to run around and play around and run around the block and play with your friends around the block. Ride your grandfather. I learned to ride on my grandfather's bike. So you could probably say I was a spoiled middle class kid growing up in the Caribbean, actually.
So you mentioned your grandfather and your father. So what were some key things that were instilled in you from your father and grandfather growing up in Trinidad?
Just seeing their lifestyle, I think. I'll give you one note about my father that should kind of define the kind of dichotomy I grew up with. I was sitting in my grandfather's veranda playing Monopoly with a bunch of other kids from the neighborhood. And my father strolled by, looked at us and said, wow, you're getting programmed with this capitalist society. And this was in 54 or something. So that was the kind of father I had. He was a socialist. He was he spent a lot of time with the OWTU, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. So he was a real rebel in the society that I didn't even realize at that age. But that's the kind of milieu I grew up in, with this father who was a bit of a giant, actually, in retrospect.
I love that. Mr. Williams, you're back. Can you hear us okay?
I can.
So tell us about your life growing up, because we know you as a Trini, but where did you really grow up, Mr. Williams? Let's educate the people.
So I am one of those Trinidadian people that really are the product of the exodus from the Caribbean in the early 50s and so on. My parents, went to England as young people. So I was actually born in London, and they were students. So life was challenging, and so because of that, they, literally, because Trinidad at that time was a colony, so to speak. Trinidad and Tobago was a colony. My father literally, took me to his friend Reynold Ash, and said, "Listen, yeah, I know you're going home on holiday. Carry this child for Sheila, mother for me." You know, that kind of thing. So literally, and so I ended up in San Fernando at the age of 3 years old, and lived with my grandmother and grandfather, and any uncles and aunties that was still at home. They all helped to raise me together. So I'm very much a product of the Quammie family, um, and then all of the extended branches, the Braffits, and I come from a large family in terms of my mother's family. My mother was one of nine. Sorry, one of seven. My grandmother was one of nine, and you know what I mean. The Braffits are huge, and so one of the things that I really relish about my upbringing is that I had a grandfather. I was listening to Tony talking about, his father being a giant. And, I had a grandfather who was like that. He was literally, he first of all, his name was Percival Quammie. So there was no illusions, as we can sometimes have in the Caribbean, about whether you're African or whether you're European and all this stuff. I never experienced any period of life that I can remember, even as a child, where I didn't know that I was an African person. And in fact,
Mm.
my grandfather knew of his Ashanti roots, because that information was passed down in his family. And so, I was raised to know myself as an African boy, even from a very young age. So when other children at school were, saying, well, my name is McFarlane, and, I'm Scottish and all this kind of stuff, I just didn't know what they were talking about, because, I really understood from very young that I was an African person. And my grandfather was really instrumental. My grandmother laid down the cultural values and the discipline, so to speak. Up to today, I think of all the five grandchildren that grew up in my house, I might have seen my grandfather strike a child once,
Mm.
and that was my cousin Alan. And trust me, if my yeah, he was quite a handful. So, but my grandfather really and truly believed in a kind of parenting that was all about creating intelligent children. I
Mm.
look back today, and I am so thankful for having, been in his presence. First of all, he had a baritone. People think I have a low voice. My grandfather had a voice that when he spoke, the floorboards used to shake, right? And not from him shouting. This is just normal conversation. I remember, even as a when I came to Canada and so on, and I would call, to Trinidad, and I would talk to him. I'd have to hold the phone kind of at a distance out here because he had this incredible baritone voice, and he was quite a figure in that way. I learned a lot about the history of African people. I learned about a lot about the history of African people in the Caribbean. I learned all about the Caribbean, and I'm just going to sew it up with one little anecdote. When we were kids, they used to march us down in Monrepo School to go and see movies every once in a while. It was movie day, and all the school kids would have to press their clothes a special, and then they would walk them down from Monrepo down to Strand Theatre, and we would sit in pit to view the film. And this one day, I was really young, and the film that they wanted us to see that day was a film starring Victor Mature, and the backdrop of the film was the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya. But this particular version, as the Europeans would do, was a version of that film, of the version of the Mau Mau rebellion, where essentially the Mau Mau died in huge numbers at the hands of Victor Mature as he sort of mowed them down, with his gun and so on, and protected, of course, the ladies who were perfectly coiffed, not a hair out of place for the entire trip through the jungle, right? So anyway, so I went home and I was telling my grandfather about, having seen the film that day and so on. And this man sat me down and broke down the Mau Mau rebellion and the Mau Mau revolution in Kenya for me, right? I would never forget that. It was one of my earliest lessons in African revolutionary theory, okay? And that the things that he said to me and the things that he explained, he went as far back as, the whole European global colonial project. And, he really took the time. And I had to be about 6 or something, but that was my grandfather. So I have to say that, as I think about myself today, even as a father and so on, I am a product of Percival Quammie, no doubt.
See, this is what I'm talking about, people. And we're just starting. And, I already know as I was talking and curating this conversation, we have to have a discussion just about the history of Black fathers, all going all the way back and how it shaped us today. And so, Mr. Anton James, tell us about your growing up. What was that like? What was that foundation like for you?
Growing up was interesting for me. It was a little different in the sense of my family, the family structure, the core is solid and it's strong. Growing up, and so there was always interaction. There was always interactions at my household and then in my grandparents' household. And then so it was a joy to sit down there and kind of understand how we learn from each other. So, when I was younger, my mother, she's very, 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 very nurturing. But let me say the but. And I'll just leave it right there. The but. But you know what? That really kind of really anchored in me certain aspects. And I remember when I was young, she taught us values. She taught us values. Like, for example, it was different to me. So from the time I was 6 years old, I already knew what my scholastic journey would be. I knew where I'd be going to school. I didn't know which high school. I knew which private school I was going to. From there, I knew which university I was going to, and I knew that at the end there was a goal. That Anton, you tell me and my brother, you're destined for things and so forth. So she always put a certain amount of value in us from younger. She put value on things. She put value on things that were, understand your narrative, look around and kind of understand what society, what they say, not necessarily the reality, what they said. Because I didn't understand, like growing up when you're younger, you don't know, color doesn't mean anything when you're younger. You know, um, values doesn't mean anything to when you're younger. What means things is you want to go and play. You want to do everything you see your friends doing. And sometimes you think that's actually the best way, but she would always say, Anton, you've got to be 10 times better to be equal to that. No, what does that mean? And you don't really understand it when you're younger. And she would say, you know what, Anton, you've got to understand certain things, that what's in value in life. Don't focus on the minutia. She would say small things. You have the phrases that it wouldn't make sense to me. And my grandmother was the same thing. But my grandmother, I didn't really understand my grandmother when I was younger, because she would say phrases that would make absolutely no sense. You guys made reference to Trinidad. Mine was from Jamaica. And so we'd come with phrases that would be shared with me that would send values that was somewhat different. You go up in school and, Mom, listen, there's a party going on this weekend. Everybody's going. Can I go? And I would get interesting responses that was somewhat different. Not everybody's going. Not everybody. Well, so you have to learn to be creative and understand what those things meant. When you hear certain things, or you want to go out and everyone's going, and you'd hear phrases such as, where bones are not provided, dogs are provided. So for those who don't understand what that means, if you're not invited, you're not going anywhere. So it's a different perspective on how we interacted. We really had a Caribbean focused mentality. And my grandmother, my grandmother specifically, I remember we were going to school once and they were talking about, you made reference to, and I would have all these guys in my class of all variations and all shades of colors and cultures and background. But, it seemed to turn, everyone's always calling out their Scottish and their Irish and their English ancestry. I'm like, well, hold on. My friend, you can't. I said, this is what you're going on. I said, what about the 5 generations before that? Why you don't call that out? Why is this? But my grandmother, she would sit me down there and she would offer her head, similar to what Brother Quammie was talking about. She would tell me 7 generations where you come from. She says, your son of grandson is this, your great grandfather is this, your uncle's this, you're this. And so I knew a lot of my kin. I knew the kindred, because when we go back to Jamaica, she would say, okay, this is where you came from. This is the house. This is where we grew up. This is where we stood. This is our land. And even where you come back from. So we were always solid on terms of understanding. It was different in my household. Brother Pierre talked about middle class. I started out, I've had both. I've had, I've said I have highs and I've had lows. When I was younger, my parents split up. And my parents, when we were doing very well. When we split up, my mother decided to do things very independently. So money wasn't the primary thing. But I'll be honest and truthful, I did not realize that we were struggling for money when I was younger. I did not realize it. And the reason why, because we were so entrenched in doing things that was phenomenal. I couldn't care less. We had porridge all the time. She thought it was a terrible thing. I was in heaven. Yes! Porridge again, wicked! And I was happy. And it really showed us the value of certain things. Like when I was going on, everyone had these toys. I didn't have a toy. I had my brother. That's all I needed. I was like,
come on now, Anton.
Didn't want to play. Listen. Yes. Too bad for him. He's playing one way or the other. Because I will play, I will pick him and run. And it was games. There were games for me. Even if it was only my own games. And you don't recognize those values. But then we had a strong connection with families. We grew up with my aunties and uncles, and it would be nothing. So my grandmother had a double king bed. This bed was massive, and we'd go there all the time. And when we'd go there, all of us would sleep in there. So it'd be my mom, my brother, me, my 2 aunties. It was jokes all the time. It was always jokes. But there was always, and then my auntie when she got married, she had a little one. And the jokes were always great until, sometimes children doesn't really know how to hold their bladder at night times. those jokes had come to an end at that point. But it really anchored us in the value. And I say that to say this. Yes, we end up, middle class, yes, we had. And, I went to private school, I did just a few other things, but that really wasn't the focus. We were really focused on one, it was church and it was family. Those were the fundamentals. When I was younger, and I remember, and I'm going to just give you another example because I don't want to hijack all the time there. When I was younger, I remember, you'd always hear about the stories. And if you win $1 million, what would you do? If you did this, what would you do? If you did. And I remember one day I came home for lunch. I came home for lunchtime, and normally you run home at lunchtime, you're ready to listen to Fred Flintstones or whatever foolish cartoons on the show. And I came home that day. My mom was home. I said, Mom, tell me a story. And she decided to tell me the story of Solomon. And she had told me the night before, and I said, Mom, tell me that story again. And then after she told me that story, for whatever reason, that day it clicked. And I said, Mom, you know what? I'm going to pray for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
Wow.
And I don't know why it was. I can remember the day. I can remember what I was wearing. I can remember everything on that particular day. And from that day forward, I pray for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding all the way through. And I thank God for it. And I'm going to tell you why. The reason why, because at that time, I don't think he gave it to me, but it came in dispensations. But that nurturing and that foresight and that continual feeding by my mother specifically, it really helped shape who I was. And the reason why I'm saying that's important, because in school up here, my experience was very much different than all the other kids. When I was younger, I grew up in Mississauga. When I left, I went into we were into a smaller town. And when I went to that smaller town, there was very few that looked like me. And the truth being was this: if it was not for my mother, I would have been disseminated out. Why? You would have teachers sit down there, and I would do well in the class. I do well in the class in science. But you know what? He said, I can't believe you got this mark. It would remark the test right in front of the whole class. You put your hand up, you could put your hand up till it bleed. And he would never call out your hand. But you don't put your hand up because you don't know the answer. That's the day he's calling you out.
That's the day they call you out and shame you, try to shame you. Yeah, yeah.
That day, my mother would fight. And she really started to entrench certain values that, you know what, you've got to stand up. My mother was a bear. She was the most nurturing and loving, but dear God, she touched, let me tell you something. You touch her children. I love my mom for that, man. She's coming in. One last thing, when I was, and why that was important, and how that really shaped me, who I was, because that was also my grandfather. My grandfather came through, and he was very jovial, always jokes, always fun, always family. But when I was in grade 8, when you go in grade, back in those days, you had got to choose general, advanced, and basic. Well, I remember in that class I went in, because remember I told you in grade 6, from 6 years old, I knew where I was going. I was going to university. If you go to university, you have to have advanced classes. And I chose all advanced. And my grade 8 teacher, he said, no, you should do a trade. Why don't you become I think it was a carpenter or something. And he went to the high school and he changed all my classes from advanced to general.
Wow.
Well, needless to say, my mother had a few words to say. I thank God for mothers. And I say that to say this because it really made an endemic mark on my brain that, you know what, regardless, no matter how the obstacles be, regardless of what Goliath you're going against, you can stand up and you can fight. And that's translated in so many aspects in my life going forward. It's continued to anchor me in family. It's continued to anchor me in church. It's continued to anchor me in my desire to stand up and fight for mine.
I love it. I'm loving this conversation, and I don't know about anybody else. Y'all need to just share, because this is better than Young and the Senseless. This is better than NCIS and whatever y'all want to watch tonight. That's you people, but already getting. And I hope people are understanding the foundation that we have gotten as Black people is so important to who we are, and especially as Black men, hearing what the foundation that your families have set forth for you, and it has turned you into the men that you are. And I can tell, like, I know people are now going to get to know you, but I know you as fathers, and I know the type of fathers that you are. And it is really just supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. That's the word that's going to be in me tonight. I am not Mary Poppins or whomever else. Have I lost Dwayne Wellington Ratchery? Dwayne, we were coming to you next, but we will move forward, and well, until Dwayne comes back. And so, Kwame, let me jump to Anthony. Dwayne, you come back? You
Bring it
back?
back.
You back with us, Dwayne?
Looks that way.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All right, so give us a little taste of your background, what it was like growing up, because you grew up in the U.S. and that's very different than the Caribbean and Canadian experience. What was that like, and what was that foundation that was set for you to make you into the man that you are today and the father that you are today?
Well, just a little bit of correction. I did not grow up in the U.S. I actually got to the U.S. as an adult, but I was glad when I heard Anton say Jamaica, because I was thinking all these Trinidadians, I don't understand what's going on.
I'm there, man. I'm there with you. I'm there with you.
My God.
So,
Oh,
but I smiled because I had just to piggyback on the theme that I hear, I had a juxtaposition growing up in that I had this last name Ratchery, and I was taught that about my Scottish heritage. But then I was also taught that my paternal great grandfather fell in love with and married a black African woman. This woman was so black it is told that she was blue. That's how physically dark she was. And he fell in love with this woman and married her. And so I had this juxtaposition in that to put in perspective for you, we were never allowed to speak in our household anything except standard English.
Absolutely.
So you can't chat them way. I'm sorry. You had to
Yeah.
speak standard English,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I saw, for instance, to put in perspective again, pictures of my father in the Royal Air Force, because of course Jamaica was a colony as well until 1962. And here's this picture of these soldiers, and he would jokingly say, "Can you spot me in the picture?" Of course, just used to spot him. It was a black and white picture, but there was just one black dot in that picture, and that was him. So I had this juxtaposition growing up where I was taught to be proper, to speak properly, yet to express yourself using the vernacular. So, for instance, my father was a writer. My father was a playwright and a poet, and so in art, the vernacular came through, but in education, standard English came through, and that was mainly because he said you can get nowhere in this world where you really, really want to go without education, whatever that education looks like. It didn't have to be necessarily a quote unquote university education from the University of the West Indies, but it needed to be education nonetheless. And then just like so many of the gentlemen that spoke before me, the same is true for my grandparents. My grandfather was 5 feet, maybe 6 inches, 120 pounds soaking wet. But when he spoke, he had this booming voice, and it wasn't because of the baritone, because his voice was loud to the point where even his great grandchildren now, we hear them speaking and we go, okay, we call them Papa. That's Papa voice, right? He had this force. And so I grew up learning to be at the forefront, even if I was in the back of the room. So I grew up having this personality where I was almost taught to be in control, even if I was not in the first chair. So the challenge was to be that person and yet remain humble. And that brought me through. Then again, like many of us, any family members, when I went to high school, I was sent almost like Brother Quammie to live with somebody else, to live with an uncle. my uncle at the time happened to be
Dwayne,
happened to be a member of the.
go ahead. Yeah, you were frozen for a little bit. Your uncle.
Am I
Go
back?
ahead. Yes, you're
Okay,
back.
sorry about that. My uncle happened to be a member of the Jamaican government, so I was exposed to that side of the tracks, as it were. I was exposed to government officials. I was exposed to meetings. I was exposed to all these things to which you become accustomed when dealing with the elite, as it were. And yet the humility remained. So I had all of this juxtaposition growing up before moving to the United States. And when I moved to the United States as an adult, then all of those things come into alignment, and you realize that these individuals were setting a foundation to allow you to operate not only with a sense of excellence, but also with a sense of identity. So that was my childhood.
Thank you, Dwayne. That it's so amazing. The foundation. If one key lesson out of here is foundation is key. Foundation is key. And so, Tony, what was it like becoming a father of a little girl for the first time? What was that like? Your pride and joy. I know she's the apple of your eye. I know.
Um, I'll start. I'll start where I actually wasn't keen on bringing a child into the world, because I grew up. I came into Toronto in the late 60s, 70s, and if you know that period, that was turmoil in the U.S. That was when the hippies were up, the war was on. There were people picketing, etc. Marching. It was a real dread time in North America. That's when they killed the police shot the kids in Kent State University and all. So those were my formative years in Toronto. There was chaos in the US. So I looked at that and I thought that I didn't want to bring a child into this world to have to deal with that insanity. And my father, at the same time, my father was a bit of a revolutionary in the Caribbean. He was up there with CLR James and some of the real luminaries in the Caribbean and so on, always in opposition politics and stuff. So I grew up into one. I looked at the planet around me and went, I don't want to bring a kid into this. And at some point through there, my daughter was born in 78. I probably shouldn't have said that, ladies and their age, but and so it had started to level off, and I had real big. My wife is a real family person. She comes from a huge family of 2 parents and 10 kids, and all she wanted was a family. So here was I not wanting kids, and she wanted a family, but that was a real source of contention for a long time. And I am a rebel in that I am not into the whole religious thing. I call myself a born again atheist. So I'm the exact opposite of Dwayne. But it hit me because I also had a lot of knowledge of Earth history and so going along with it. I realized at one point in my life that the only thing evolution keeps you alive for is to pass your genes on. If you don't pass your genes on, you actually have not mattered one speck in the greater in the greater sense of things on the planet.
Wow.
That's all people. That's all that madness we see about fighting animals, fighting and stuff. All of that boils down to who lived long enough to pass on their genes. If you have not lived long enough to pass on your genes, you might as well have forgotten it. And that's that was just my thing. I'm not trying to sell anybody on that. That was my realization that life is useless, really, if you bring it down to the fundamentals, unless you pass those genes on. It's like if you weren't here. So that's the context in which I went, okay, you know what? I should let go of some of this revolution and not wanting a child and just let life flow. And my daughter came out of that kind of foundation. So to see her, she was also, I have to say that for her, she was a preemie. She was only 2 pounds 10 when she was born. So she was that was another kind of stress by itself. But as a child growing up, she was an absolute gem. Children can stress you, can pull you and test you. My daughter was an absolute gem. There were 1 or 2 instances where she did something crazy, but she was just this little model kid as a kid. So life was like that. It was very special for me because she was that kind of child. She was a very easy child to bring up and talk to. And one of the points I wanted to bring across in this talk tonight is I set the goal for myself that what I must be able to do with my child more than anything else is communicate. My child should be able to come to me and tell me anything. And I set about very early building that relationship with her where she could trust me that I will not overreact. I will not strangle her. I would not, I would not go ballistic. I would sit and listen and be rational, and she could tell me anything on the planet. And that's the kind of relationship I developed with her and that I still have today. And has made such a huge difference. We can still talk about anything,
And why was that important to instill, that you wanted to have that communication, that open communication for the two of you?
I actually don't know. That comes out of the background. It was really interesting hearing everybody's background and realizing what a role we were lucky, in a sense, where we grew up in multi-dimensional homes or multi-generational homes, where we had grandparents and in some cases great-grandparents and great-aunts and that kind of thing. And it makes such a difference. You come out, I think you come out with a foundation that's incredible. I don't know, that was just my instinct that what I needed, it might have come from my father too, because my father was this character in the home where he kind of popped in and popped out because he was so involved in politics in Trinidad and so on, that you saw him sometimes, you didn't see him sometimes, and he had this relationship with him that he was this kind of light that switched on and switched off sometimes. So he wasn't there a lot of the time. On the weekends and stuff, he was in the Oil Field Workers Trade Union. But the thing he did with me was communicate. He never, as a child, he never hit me. My mother was the disciplinarian in the house, not my father. My father was the talker and the communicator to the end of his days, and I probably just inherited that from him. That I had a child, and what I needed to do was be able to have that person talk to me about anything, any problems, she should be able to come to me with anything, and I should be rational and calm and listen and build that. It's just almost an instinctive thing, really.
I love that, Tony, and hearing that history of you and Kathy, and I want to bring up Quammie right now because for so many reasons. Because Quammie has before we go into Quammie, you becoming a father for the first time. Um, what was that like for you? And I'm not going to go into this next question that's going to relate to you and Tony. What was that like for you becoming a father for the first time? Kwame, can you hear me?
Was that just not if you're asking me if what it was like becoming a father for the first time? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
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 Okay. So, well, I had a lot of dads that I was surrounded by at the time I became One of them actually is with us this evening, right? I knew Tony and Joan before I became a dad. And, I spent a lot of time observing the fathers around me, Of course, I had, as I told you, my own experience of fatherhood, both with my grandfather and with my mother's uh, brother, who was in the house in Trinidad. When I was a boy, who took me as his own son, to the point where even up until recently, when he passed on, I still called him daddy, right? Because he raised me as if I were one of his children. And so I had really good role models in terms of fathering, and I learned a lot from some of the people around me. And as I said, one of the people that I learned from, I don't think he necessarily knew that I was watching him all the time, but but I was watching Tony Pierre a lot. I
I
really
didn't.
was, because I was around when Kathy was born. I watched the whole sort of evolution. I watched the strategy, and so I was really excited to become a dad. I was one of those young guys that, if I had found somebody by the time I was 17 who was willing to do it, I was going to start a family, right? Fortunately, I did not meet anybody like that, but I swear, if if I did, I'd be there, because I wanted very much to have family. That's why even my children now, I always tell my children, I say, I loved you before you even were born, because I knew what my intention was with regards to children. I saw clearly that one of the most important things that we could do as human beings were to bring forth a next generation, and not only that, not just to have them as children, but also to create in them the future that we want to see for our families, for our communities, for the world. And so I knew, like from really young, I knew that I wanted to be a parent, and I knew that I wanted to do it well. Um, and
Wow.
um, and so I went into it with a real plan. With a real plan, I wanted to have 10 children. Um, it may be the reason that I divorced
Hold
the
on,
first
hold
time.
on, hold on. 10, 10, you say, 10, 10.
I
All
did
right.
say 10. I did say 10. No, I had a plan. I had a plan. I was going to have 10 children, and they were, of course, they were all going to be stellar children. Now, I have to tell you that I am an only child. The siblings I have is they're cousins, really, because we were all being raised by the grandparents in Trinidad. But my own self, I'm an only child, and so by the time I just wanted to be able to do it right. And so yeah, I was aiming at 10 children. And I think people who knew me as a young man, and married to my first wife, I think they well settled on she that didn't work, because 10 children is just a bit much for anybody to conceive. So I get it. I have I do have five now. I do have five now.
That's
So
good.
I would say that I've completed the task about 50%. But one of the things that I hit upon in life, really, is that if you love parenting and you love fathering, and you really see your purpose as nurturing another generation, there are plenty young people in the community who can use good parenting. And so I like to
Yes.
say I have five biological children, but I have about, as you know, Nicole, I have about 25 children,
Yes.
right?
One of
And
them is
when I
mine.
say 25 children, I don't mean children that I talk to once in a while. I'm talking about, I have 25 children that I am parenting all the time. And it's nothing but a great pleasure for me. I if I were to count up, I have no biological grandchildren, but
Yes.
from the children I've parented, I have quite a few. So so yeah, I have found real joy in extending the concept of parenting beyond one's biological children. So I talk about the joys of becoming a parent in terms of biological children, but I could say that the joy of becoming a parent for me started before I even had children, right? So much so that one of my first serious relationships was with a lady with 2 children, and I was 17 years old. So,
Mm.
so I wanted to be a dad real bad.
So, Kwame, you're too much. I just love it, and you really are. You are the community father. If there ever was a community father, that is you. But what I didn't get from both you and Tony, and then I'm going to go to Anton, is and I'm just going to give you your flowers, as the people and they say. Kwame makes me laugh, but I get it. Loving Paul is loving the conversation. Um, and for those of you joining us live and on the replay, welcome to the conversation. This is a Victory Speaks Zero, and this is Nicole Waldron, your voice of victory and your mental fitness coach. And tonight I have with me Anthony, Pierre, Anton James, Rudy, Quammie Williams, and Dwayne Wellington. And the conversation is powerful because all of us are having technical difficulties. But I want to do the show live. It's more important to me to do it live. We're going to have to do the show again, and we're going to tape it because there are many facets to this conversation that we need to have. But before I go to Anton, Anthony and Kwame, you did not tell me. Let me go into my Trini accent. You didn't tell me when you see the child for the first time, what it was like. What it was like when you see the baby.
Okay, I can tell you. I'll try to be really quick. So the first time, first of all, I was so gung ho about being a dad that we decided that we were having a home birth, right? And I somehow had it in my head that I knew that this was going to be a girl child, okay? And so much so that I convinced pretty well everybody around me that I was having a daughter, because I would speak in those terms even before the child was born. And so, the baby was born at home. I was one of those guys on the bed with mom laboring, like, here, rest your head here, sit here, and so and so. The midwives were so fascinated that 5 of them attended the birth. They just wanted to see these crazy young Black people who were like having home births at a time when people who were having home births were under so much pressure because the ministry was trying to to ban them. And so the physician that I had at the time, when I insisted that we were going to do the home birth, he came and he stayed upstairs from where we live so that he would nobody could say he was at the birth. You see what I mean? And he stayed upstairs, I'll never forget, and he watched the Falklands crisis on TV for the entire time. And so the thing is, when Juma, my son, was born, because I was so convinced that this was a girl child, and he was so pretty, to me, right? So so when he was born, I caught him out of his mother's womb. I wrapped him in the little blanket. I wouldn't let anybody touch him before me. And, I held him, I looked at him, and finally they were like, well, Kwame, you got to put him down. You got to put him on his mom. So anyway, I took him and I put him on his mom's belly, as we had already planned, and had rehearsed. So then, because I was so convinced that I was having a girl, I then went out the house and ran through the neighborhood, shouting at everyone at the top of my voice that my daughter is here, and don't they know I was right? Okay. So now in home births, what they do is they let the umbilical cord finish pulsating for a while before you cut it, right?
Right.
So the midwife, the midwife says, well, Kwame, let's go and cut the cord. I said, okay. So I went back into the room with the midwife, and we're there, and she and I, and as I'm getting the cord all ready to be cut, and they clamped it off and everything, this midwife, who had none of the midwives I had had ever seen a black child born before. Okay.
Wow.
So this midwife, who was used to working up on the on the reserves in Ojibwe territory, she said to me, she says, "Quammie, what is that?" Pointing at my son's penis. She said, "What is that?" So, so I started looking, and I said, because I was so convinced, I wouldn't even accept the fact that I was looking at a penis. So finally, I said to her, "Colleen, I think that's a penis." She's like, "Yeah, I think that's a penis." By this time, I had called up family members, telling them that, we have a little girl and so on. And so now, after the cord thing was, done and clamped and cut and everything, I now had to go back in my neighborhood to tell people. My father, when I called my father to say, I made a mistake, right? It's a girl, it's a boy, sorry, it's a boy. I didn't, but literally, my father won every argument that we were going to have from that point on, because he would literally, in any discussion we were having, he would say, "I don't know what me and studying you because you don't even know the difference between boys and girls."
Okay.
Oh my God.
So I have.
That is the story of the first time I saw my son.
Oh
So
my
you know
God.
what? It's really interesting hearing that. I didn't know that story, and I have the most beautiful bookend to that, because we were supposed to have not a home birth, but I was supposed to be there. The father was there, and we started going for these lessons. I forget what they call the method of birth at that point.
Lamaze class.
We were supposed to deliver the Lamaze method or Lamaze method, and of course, with my daughter being anxious to get in the world at 2 pounds 10, it didn't quite work out that way. It was a rush down to Mount Sinai. She was born in Mount Sinai Hospital, and it was a disaster. I was standing in the delivery room, trying not to strangle the doctor, because they were panicking. They knew this was 7 months. This was a 7-month birth, right? And so the doctor was definitely stressed out. He was not in control. And I had to stand back from all the confusion and watch my daughter being delivered. It was a real panic and so on. So it was a very stressful birth. My wife was on another planet. I never heard her scream like that in my life. So because she had no needle and all of that stuff, it was just pain. So I was just standing. I remember standing in the room, and I said I was a born again atheist, right? But at that point I wanted to pray, and I'm going, Pierre, you cannot pray at this time. That is ridiculous. You're cussing the man, you're cussing religion, all kind of things for the last how many years, and now you're coming to pray like this. Stand up, swallow it, and deal with it, because you can't pray. So that was me in the delivery room. And what is so beautiful about Quammie's story and my story is the doctor told us we had a boy. In his stress and panic and stuff, we had a boy. It was stress to get the child out, and because it was a preemie, what they do is they wheel you from Mount Sinai underground over to Sick Children's Hospital, who take over looking after the preemie when you're that premature, to pounds 10, because you're going into an incubator and you're across to Mount Sinai. So I was convinced I had a boy, like Quammie. Luckily, I was in the hospital, so I didn't scream and tell anybody. I didn't have to back up on it. It's a little, thank God there were mixed nurses in the room. And this little Bajan nurse who was working on her navel to prep her for being wheeled across to sick kids said, you have a girl, eh? so, so the doctor,
Oh my God.
we had a boy, the Caribbean nurse, Bajan, I think she was, reminded us that it was a girl.
Oh my God.
So that was so I should tell an interesting story there about the sick kids side, because I remember I am this kind of I try to stay out of stuff emotionally. So I was in a space where I was afraid to bond with my daughter. At 2 pounds 10, you don't know whether they're gonna make it or not. So I'm going like, should I bond? I will say this for my wife. My wife decided that 2 pounds 10 or not, her daughter was making it through, and there was no question about whether or not. So I was kind of a little remote from my child, because I wasn't sure. I didn't want to put myself through the grief of bonding and then having to deal with the loss of the kid. My wife just decided this was her child. Nothing was going to happen to her child. This is her one child. That's it. And I would have to say I had to learn that from her. I eventually, learned to touch her in the incubator and that kind of thing. I ended up bringing down one of my thumb pianos and playing it for her, which she almost has a genetic memory of.
Wow.
So that was my bonding. I did eventually bond with my daughter through the incubator at bond, but she also got very sick. She had jaundice or some craziness. So that was another nightmare. You already have 2 pounds 10, then this attack of jaundice, and you don't know what's gonna happen. And so, but somehow through it, I managed to bond, and here I am.
And now she's the apple of your eye, and the two of you like bim and bam.
What can I say?
Yeah, I think Joan probably blonded with her in the beginning, but I don't know. I don't know if Kathy listening, so let me hush my mouth before I get myself in trouble. So, Mr. Wellington, what was it like you having your okay? If you guys are enjoying this conversation, show your hearts. I know everybody was laughing. You guys had me in tears. I needed waterproof mascara today and stuff. I didn't have it. I was not prepared for the amount of laughter that I'm having right now. So, right now I feel like I have to call Pastor Rattray to bring it back together. What I can't even call you Dwayne right now. What was it like for you having your firstborn?
Well, it was interesting. It was winter. I remember so very clearly. It was November, and my wife woke up and she said, I woke up, sorry, and she was already awake, just lying in the dark. And I thought, well, what are you doing? She was calm, quiet, and she said to me, my water broke. At which point, all the training, all the reading, all the YouTube university went out the window, and I panicked. And I grabbed my phone, and she said, calm down, it's okay. This is 5 o'clock in the morning. She said, it's okay, I'm not going to be for a while. And she said, let's just relax. And so I called at 8 o'clock. As soon as 8 o'clock hit, I called my boss, and he said to me, okay, Dwayne, I'll see you in a few weeks. He didn't even say hello, but the mere fact, I was working at an insurance company at the time. I was an underwriter, and I worked the West Coast. So I would come in later on in the afternoon to service the West Coast. So the mere fact that I was calling early in the morning, he figured, well, and all he said was, okay, see you in a few weeks. And she was very calm. She said, I'm not going to spend the whole day in the hospital. And so as people may know, they advise you when you're coming to the hospital not to eat. But she said she wanted to go. Now, this is in the United States. This is, of course, as you alluded to, I was in the States. She said she wanted to stop at IHOP, International House of Pancakes, to get, yeah, exactly, to get French toast. So I said to her, foolish young man said to her, you can't eat. And she just sort of glared at me, and I thought, okay, fine. We'll stop at IHOP. So we stop at IHOP. I go get the French toast, and I am panicking because I'm thinking, your water broke. You need to get hospital now. And she's saying, no, it's fine. Just take your time. And each contraction, she would just sort of tense. and then relax. No screaming, no pain. Well, there was pain, but no screaming, no hollering. She was calm as ever. Interesting. This is in Baltimore, Maryland. And so we stop at IHOP. She gets her French toast. No meat, just the French toast. And we go to the hospital, wheel her in. Interestingly, this was also the name of the hospital, Mount Sinai, but this is Baltimore, Maryland, Mount Sinai. So we get there, and 10 hours later, the doctor says, "Okay, Mr. Ash, we're ready to take the baby now." She's fully dilated at 10 centimeters. 10 hours later, and she sort of looks at me and says, "See, I told you there was no need to rush." And she was determined that she was going to get that needle in her spine. She said, "I'm not pushing out this boy. We knew it was a boy. I'm not pushing out this boy without any needle." So there's this. I believe the anesthesiologist must have been a new doctor, because he was very timid. Here is this black woman who doesn't show any sign of pain except a small grimace every now and again. So when he attempted to push the needle into her spine, she 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 jerked, dangerous thing, and she said to him, "Can my husband stand in front of me?" So I stood in front of her to brace her. She braced against me, and she cursed at him because she figured he wasn't doing it properly. Then finally she pushes, and I'm at the south end of the business. I'm not on the bed like Kwame. This is not a home birth. And I'm at the south end of the bed. I
So it,
wanted to be north, quite frankly. Okay, I listen. If,
ah,
if you have never seen a birth as a young man, it can be traumatic. I don't care what
oh
anybody
God.
says. Don't get me wrong, beautiful experience, but it can be traumatic. So I'm south side, and he comes out, and there is this peace. He cries a little. They give me the scissors. They ask if I want to cut the umbilical cord. I cut the umbilical cord. They wrap him up in that towel, in that blanket that every hospital in the world has. They put him on her stomach, on her chest, and I just looked at him, and I said to myself, "Wow, you're a father." And it just hit me that your life is going to has changed for the rest of your life. And interestingly, to this day, that young man that was 18 years ago, almost 19 years now. And to this day, he is so calm, nothing bothers him. He is cool. He's a drummer. He just sits very quietly. You know how musicians can be, right, Nicole? And he has this demeanor, and I must say that I suspect he didn't get this cool demeanor from me, because I can be a little, high strung sometimes. But he gets that from his mother. But that experience was one of the best moments of my life. Um, this is why that's why we call him Nathaniel, God's gift, because at that moment my life took a turn down a road I never expected it to. Not fatherhood per se, but just the trajectory that I found on which I found myself.
My God, I am so loving these stories. I don't know how we end in this show tonight. I am just lost. I'm lost in the own show. I am totally lost. Anissa says, I have to say this. Honestly, from someone who never grew up with grandparents or a father, these conversations mean so much to me. Black fathers are the foundation. Loris is such great stories, gentlemen. And I need to give you guys your as the Americans say your flowers, because you're really bringing life. It may seem very simple conversations, but you know we've had so many negative conversations about black men and black fathers. It's so good to see fathers that are healthy and wealthy in their mind, body, soul, and spirit, and fathering from such this way, and hearing how you embrace fatherhood. And so Dr. James, as I like to call my friend Anton, he's not a doctor, but I given everybody the doctorate. I feel I have this anointing of doctoratism that, yes, I made up a word, that I am a Trinidadian, I can do that. So, Dr. James, what was it like for you being that father, seeing that first child?
Going back, from the time I was young, as I told you, it really takes back to the foundation. So from the time, as I said, I was 6 years old, I knew what schools I was going to, I knew which university I was going to. But shortly thereafter, I also knew that I had to have kids. I had a cousin that just said, I don't care if I had them. If I have them, if I do, I don't. Me, nope, I knew. Growing up in my household, it was a very different household. My house and my mother's house, my grandmother's household, it was different. You could be at your grandma, I'm going on vacation to my grandmother's house, and you could go there in the morning, and you have a roommate at nighttime to take everybody, anybody, who's ever will, just come and they're staying in the house. And so you grew up in the environment where you were, there was people there, could be young kids there. And so you grew up, and my mother was very, very nurturing. So I grew up that nurturing side. It's like, listen, you know what? I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the nurturing side, but then I enjoyed the other side. My dad he was very analytical. He was very analytical. He was very he was more strategic with this aspect. My mother, so it was a good balance. So when I was getting ready to, when I was getting married, I was like, listen, man. She's like, hey, you know what? I could. And I was like, nope. Look, listen to me. Hey, I love you to death. I knew my wife for years and years. And I said, but listen, this can't be something we change our mind. Ain't nothing wrong. I'll love you to death to the very end. But if kids aren't in the plan, then I can't be in that plan because I need to have the ones. And then so once I said, okay, look, I want them. And I said, first of all, then I said, I want a girl. I want a girl first. Knowing if I would grow up, I said I wanted a boy. But this was selfish. I won't lie. It was straight selfish. I wanted a girl because I could kiss and love her up and treat her up, and girls love their daddies. And I said, I want a girl. I want a girl. So along the way, I just similar to Quammie, I knew it was a girl. And so, the father instinct kicked in even when she was in the belly. I had to fight a few doctors along the way. I remember one time we had a doctor's appointment and she's testing, and the doctor is, what the man said, man, no sense. The man a push, I'm not push. I'm like, yo, hey. That's my child. Just take it easy. Take time. Take time. It's not bread. It's not a loaf of bread. It's not a fruit. Take time. Like, listen, man, I wasn't playing around. That's my little girl. You got to be careful what's going inside there, man. And so he's like, oh, well, I've seen it. I said, you can see 1,000,000. You've never seen this one. So that was my experience. So from the very beginning, like I had that, that side just kicked in.
Oh,
so similar to Dwayne there, Pastor. I was on the south side, but listen, I was there with y'all. Full army fatigue. I was ready. I had a camera. I was videotape. I was seeing everything. I'll be truthful. I had no idea what I was going to expect, and it was a sight. It was a sight. But it was interesting because in there, man, I remember. So back up a little bit. My auntie, for every one of my auntie's kids, even when her husband was there, I was there for every one of the kids being born. I was actually in the room. I wasn't south side. I was north side, but I was there for all of them. But when mine was born, I remember I was getting nervous, and I was getting really nervous for many reasons. One, when you're sitting down there, I could hear down the hall, and that was the most, because you heard, some things are universal. I don't, some people have called me Blasian, and I've heard a whole bunch of names, got funny eyes, but I don't speak Chinese. I don't speak Indian. I don't speak anything. But that day, I understood what every one of those women were saying, because down the hall, you were hearing some universal languages that were screaming and hollering, and they were very creative with the English language, Chinese language, Mandarin. They were very creative. And that day I was sitting down there, out of all that chaos and screaming, my wife at the time, she wasn't really screaming. She was, you can tell she was really bracing, but she wasn't screaming like you were hearing. But then all of a sudden it was like, I can't describe it. It wasn't, I think you said it best. It was like a sudden peace came down. You saw it come on. Everything else didn't matter. It was beautiful. It was a lot, but it was beautiful. You saw her come. When
Oh,
she came out, there was no other word to say. She was beautiful. She was absolutely beautiful. I just there was nothing like it. My mother, my wife's mother was there, and she was cussing me the whole time. Don't show video, pictures and videos. I said, listen to me. When you had your child, I wasn't there. She's my wife. I'll watch. Hey, believe me, I put it in there, and I'm going to take it out. Believe me. But
oh
all
God.
that chaos, all that craziness, when you see her actually come out and you hold her for the first time, there is nothing like it. There is nothing. There is there's no money. There's no experience. At that moment I knew, because at that point there's a culmination in life. Strategically, I know certain things. Everyone, most people start off with roadmaps. That's what they're going to do by this age and that age. It wasn't that, but I knew there's a calling for me, and part was to be a father. That was fully part. And when it actually happened, it was like, I just can't describe it, because at that stage everything changed, and I mean everything. So prior to that, man, believe me, I traveled like crazy. I've been to Canada, US, Europe. I've been to every island. I've had Beamers and blah blah. I've had a nice life, but at that moment,
Mm.
nothing. I'm not care about none of that. None of that. Whatever I have now, it's my pick of them, off of them, and it just changed my perspective. So it was a beautiful thing. It was like a crossing of the barrier, and God opened the door. I just thank God. I just sat down there, and I won't even lie, I bawled a tear. I was bawling. It was beautiful.
You bawled a tear. You bawled
I
you bawled.
bawled, yeah,
I'm so
bawled a
sorry.
tear. It's one. One.
I'm done. I'm so done. Anton bawled a tear.
Hey, a
Serena,
tear.
Serena's tuned in from the US and said, I'm cracking up. I'm cracking up. I can visualize Anton with the video camera and
Oh yeah.
everything.
Oh yeah. I captured everything, man. I captured everything.
I just love you, gentlemen. I just love you so much. Okay, we're gonna pause for like 30 seconds, and I have two more questions. Listen, I have a plethora of questions for you guys tonight, and we're only gonna get through two more because this conversation is so rich. I wanted to share, as we take a mini break, that this Sunday, Father's Day, and one of the reasons I'm doing this show is about fathers and Father's Day. One of my friends, Tristan Barracks and Troy Crossfield, have worked on a project, and he's worked on a project with O'Shane Howard, and they're releasing a short film to celebrate the greatness of Black fatherhoods. And they want every Black father to know that we see you and care about you, and we're here for you. And it's going to release on Sunday at 12 p.m. So tag your fathers, and I'm going to drop it in my. I'm going to drop it in the what you might call it. What am I wanting to say? In my chat, in my comments after the show. But I just want to show you the trailer. It's like 10 seconds, and then we're going to come back with the last two questions. I'm going to let these men get a drink of water because they've been talking, and I want them to see.
Dear Dad,
I told you it was short, a mini thing. um, Joan Pierce is on the line here. Of course, Anthony Pierce on the call, so she's definitely on the line. No words to describe what these fathers just shared. Unbelievable. So now, um, I want to know, and I mean, Tony, I know you have your one, um, and no more coming, but hopefully one day we'll see a son-in-law or something like that, Kathy. Just saying. Um, but is there a difference raising a daughter versus a son? So I'm going to come question for you guys, and then we'll wrap it up with one last question for the night. But the difference raising a daughter and a son, and tell us, tell the truth, shame the devil, Anton. Tell the truth.
So I only have a daughter. On some levels, I am glad I didn't have a son.
Mm.
Because raising a black girl in Toronto, in a white society, in this white-dominated society, still, I just say thank you. For all the guys who have managed to raise sons in this and bring them in carefully and so on, I am very glad I just had a girl. I don't know what on earth I would have done with a boy. I mean, I would have done the same thing. I'd have gone for communication, but you have to understand, I guess that's the beauty with the daughter-father relationship. There's that natural bond, whereas with a boy would tend to, there's almost like a, they're predisposed to fight you and prove themselves, especially when they start going into their teenage years and stuff. And I am not as calm as I would have tried to be. I have no idea what it would have been like. My hat's off to all the fathers who have successfully raised boys in this environment. I say, when I look at what's happening with young black men today and stuff, I just have to say, thank you that I just had a girl and a gem of a girl, because I'm not sure. The trouble is, it would not have been just me. With a girl, it's kind of just me in the society, because the girls aren't under the same. The black women get the pressure later in life when they get into their careers and stuff. I don't know that they get as much pressure from the society, from the broader society early in life. But the boys get so much pressure that I have no idea what it would have been like to rear a boy in this. I'm glad I just had a girl.
You're mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I muted myself. How did you handle, Tony? I know I'm supposed to ask Anton a question, but how did you handle when your one daughter was dated? Like what had happened there?
That wasn't a problem for me at all. She had her first boyfriend in high school. She wasn't one of these A personality, A type girls, So she was a very laid back girl. So I was happy for her that she had a boyfriend, an early boyfriend, and had that experience. Went to a high school graduation together. So I had no I am not a possessive father in that way. So it was no big thing for me. It was a boy who was in a high school and so on, and he was well known. He was known to the family. He was East Indian, and he's not Caribbean East Indian, East Indian roots from India, and we had no problems, again, because I had that communicative relationship with her where she could talk to me about anything. It was actually no stress whatsoever with the first boyfriend. I had no conflict with him or nothing like that. When I first met him or something, it was cucumber calm.
Cucumber calm. I know we're gonna have to have that conversation. I see Anton piping up there because Anton have a young one. I know, we're gonna have to have a full conversation about dating when we're raising our children, dating the black man and dating the black woman, what we need to instill in our children as they start looking for because we're raising potential for husbands and potential wives, right? But for you, Anton, what is it? I know you have a question for Tony, but you want to ask him a question or you want to answer the question? Tell me which way you want to go.
I'll answer. I'll go back to it later on. I don't think we have time to go into that. But
so what's the difference between for you it's been like for raising a son and a daughter?
Oh, mercy. It's night and day. It really is total two spectrum. I'll tell you this. So I wanted a girl first. I wanted a girl first for I just again a girl, you can hug her up, you can kiss her up, you can doll her up, you can dress her up. It was a beautiful thing. And then even once I got it, once I got my girl, I was like, you know what? I'm good. I can just have just one child, and I'd be totally cool. Then my son, one day my wife came home, and I could tell she was, it was just different. I'm like, wait a second here, and she was like, oh, I'm not feeling well, and she's smelling things around the corner, and down. I'm like, wait a second here. And I came and I said, something, and certain foods she loved she couldn't take. I said, you're pregnant. No. And from that moment forward, I was like, okay, you know what? I don't care what it is. I could do it with another girl, but I want a son. But once he came forward, he was a beautiful little boy, man. But it was definitely so different in the sense of from the time they're both young. Tony made reference to, dating and so forth. And I'll go into that. But so I've preyed on them from the time they're young for their mate, their perfect little mate and so forth. But the girl, I will say I've learned as much as I've taught. So with my daughter specifically, I'm an alpha. I'm an alpha male. I don't know any other way. It just is. That doesn't mean I'm a bully by any stretch, but I'm alpha. So that means there's times I'm very stern, and I had to learn to soften down. She has softened me up. She's given me an emotional side, because I'd go to their schools. I'd drop by their schools and say, just little small conversations. Son, how was your day today? I'd go by the schools and pick them up. How was your day, son? Dad, I went to school. I saw Johnny. We raced. I beat him. We were the best. And I played soccer the late afternoon, had fun. It was great. Listen, me and my son are good. That conversation was fulfilling. It was good. That's all we need. I would ask my daughter, Aisha, how was your day?
Fine.
Remember, my son's conversation, it was in its entirety 30 seconds. He would start, well, Dad, remember the pants you gave me, one with that and the stripe with the pink stripe on it? And we wore it that one time we went to get some ice cream. Well, when I got to school first time, Susie was wearing, but instead of the now this is just the start of the conversation. Now, Susie was wearing, but she didn't wear the blue pants. The details. I was preparing for just we went da 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 da. And if you sat down there and dear God, let your face look, you're tuning out. You're not listening
to me.
No, sweetheart. No, I'm listening. And so I learned to really learn how to be emotionally intelligent and learn to communicate and learn to engage and learn to find out what she loved and then foolishness, going to gymnastics and doing the twirls with her and running around and dropping on the ground and doing the dances and look like a fool. And I couldn't care less what anyone else says. As long as she was happy, I was good.
Yes.
It was more important for her stability than my comfort. Now, when you switch to the boy now the boy, that can bring more of the alpha side out of you. So that was when you're talking about more. He wants to fight and he wants to talk and just be like you, Dad. He wears your clothes, or he tries to wear your clothes, and you dress him up like we go out and say, all right, we go to the tailor, I get a suit made, get him the exact same suit, and we'd walk to and say, yo, son, you and me, son, and we could do certain things together. But then the dynamic, but then you have to balance. They're so different, but balance enough so they are spoiled in their own separate ways, but neither one of them feel less than. Then there was a commonality of sharing, even though there was, you don't want to spend all the time nurturing into your daughter without nurturing into my son, because my son is now the youngest. So he sees me always kissing my daughter.
Right.
And how come you don't kiss me? So I kiss him on the same way too. And now it's actually ironic. He wants more kisses than she does. So you had to learn to find out, okay, how do you balance this and say, okay, son, there's certain things. Well, Dad, how come I'm getting in trouble? She's not, because she's a girl. And you know what? Because she's a girl, so you need to look for the certain things. There's certain things I'm going to give her more than I'm going to give you. But there's certain things that you're going to get away more. So when I taught them both martial arts. I taught her too. And the truth be told, she's deadly,
Yes.
but she doesn't
Yes.
like it. He loves it. So I had to teach him to fight. I teach him how to, stand up. And then, so that was the growing up side, the nurturing side. But then you just start teaching them as it starts to transition. You start teaching their brains. Say, listen, son, as a black male now, you got to understand, where you fit in society now, how you're perceived, and then what you're going to be. And my daughter, who you are now, who you really are, how you perceive, and how you got to operate. And so you would teach them, listen, society, you're in a society where we're not the dominant race over here. And there's going to be many people telling you that you are this or you're that. But who cares what anyone says? The thing called cognitive dissonance. And the cognitive dissonance is whatever you anchor in someone's brain as a younger age, they will repel everything else from there on. So I taught them their culture. I taught them who they are. I taught them I'm not talking about culture that they teach us in school where it's black or they're living in some tribal hut in Africa. No, I said where you come from, what your lifestyle is, who's your ancestry, what were you able to do, show them the potential. I lined up with their brains. I said, you are more melancholic. Melancholic means that you're going to be better with systems. Let me tell you, therefore, this is what you need to gravitate to. When you're learning, I'm going to teach you a way that's going to be more handcrafted to you. Miles, you are more this way. Because you are now more, because Asia, you're more a sanguine phlegmatic. Let me teach you ways how your brain works. We're going to talk to you in more imagery. We're going to talk to you in this. This is how you're going to do certain things. You're going to recognize what you see your white friends doing and your Chinese friends, you can't necessarily do. And the ironic thing was, I'm saying it's different, was when George Floyd, that was the first time it started to make sense because they thought I was speaking foolishness to them. But about 3 months before George Floyd happened, I would say, son, you cannot do what your white counterparts would do because you won't be seen the same. And they didn't. I would say it over and over and over, but they just wouldn't get it. Until one day there was a fight. My son was involved in a fight at school. He went to defend some boy. They got in a fight, and they called me down to the office. I go down to the office, and remember I told you the story before how my mother was a bear? The bear of a father.
That's why you're graybeard now. You take the name from Quammie. You're graybeard now. You're going to have to adopt that name, graybeard.
What? When I got down to the school, I go into the office and I see one child, my son. Maybe you didn't understand. Let me back up and tell you the story again. I went to the school because there was a fight. I go to the office and one child is there.
Yes.
My child. And so he said, Dad, how come they call? I said, anyways, I won't tell you this, but let's suffice to say, the principal will need no need of constipation, will bother for quite some while because I made sure he was well relieved of his bowels that day because I was not playing that game. How can have a fight with and one child's in the office and the other child's still in class? Anyways, so he started to recognize that they're treating me differently, Dad. And they put my hands up. They're not answering my questions, but they're always saying, in times of problem, they're calling me out. And when George Floyd happened, he started to recognize. And so all stuff I started to say, I'll say, Asia, you may not see or might not be viewed the same way as he is, because you won't be seen as an aggressive threat as a female, but you also have to be aware because they're going to instill in your brain that, you know what, the narrative is that black males are violent and this, and which goes on to where we're not committal and we're not good fathers. That's where our conversation is. But know that doesn't necessarily line up with reality. And you should teach them, okay, in narrative A, how do you respond? Why do you respond? I literally had to teach them and go through role plays and say, listen, if this happens, what are your rights? What do you do? If you see someone attacking your sister, let me tell you something. The answer is very easy. Punch first, and then let them call your father. Punch first. Anybody touch, push, hit, do anything to your daughter, Strike first, and then we will come home and we'll deal with it. Asia, if anyone jumps in and talks about your brother, don't be sitting down there if anyone's talking, cracking jokes about him, because you're not going to be a fighter, but you got to stand up for him as well. So teach them how to respond and protect each other.
The respect and the honor, the respect and the honor and the responsibility. I totally, totally get it, Anton. And
And
I
that's
love that you're teaching each of them the way to show up and instilling the values and showing them the difference as how they appear in the world.
most you have to, because the reality is they're not taught. They're taught a narrative that we as black males are, again, it's over and over again, we're violent and we're ignorant. And I'll come to work in a suit, or cause I'm going to work, and they'll say, what are you doing? What does your dad do? Oh my gosh, what does your dad?
Right.
That's indicative, because there's many other parents there in suits, But why?
But they call you up because the stereotype is that black men show up a different way. And
Right.
so as I'm cognizant of time and everything
Oh,
else,
sorry. So sorry. I'll
that's
leave
okay.
it.
That's okay, because the conversation is sweet. The conversation is sweet. I'm gonna ask Dwayne and Kwame to bring us home with some advice for fathers out there. We're approaching Father's Day, and whatever is laid on your heart. Some fathers are estranged from their children. Some people, fathers, are not here anymore. Um, and so if you could, Dwayne and Kwame, tell us, give us some words of wisdom from the gray beard and the bald head. The bald head is Dwayne, the gray beard is Kwame. Some words of wisdom, and that we can start taking it home with. Who wants to go
Well,
first?
I yield to the elder.
Oh gosh! Oh gosh!
nice
Oh
move,
gosh!
Dwayne. Nice move. Nice move. Nice move, Dwayne. Okay, so that's okay, because I do have a lot to say about what I believe people who are fathers, and those of us who are nurturing potential fathers and so on. I have a lot to say about what we need to do. So first of all, um, we have to aim for, especially black fathers, being committed and involved in the lives of their children. That's by nothing else. Committed and involved in the lives of the children. So, as we know, life doesn't. Or I'm on my second marriage, so and my fourth relationship or whatever. So we know that sometimes the families don't necessarily stay together in the same units. However, it is extremely important that we realize that no matter what, as I think Tony said it earlier, at the end of the day, one of the main reason that we're put on earth is to pass on our wisdom, pass on our genetics, to reproduce and to create those people that are going to make our world better than we met it. And so for that reason, we have to be actively committed and involved in the lives of our children. And if you have the capacity to go beyond the biological children you have, do, because that will account for those children who may have lost a dad, or for whatever reason, fathers are not physically present in a position, right? We have a huge amount of incarceration in our community. If you go to visit the prisons, you will be shocked out of your mind at the percentage, for example, of black people who are in federal and provincial penitentiaries. So that's a lot of young men, which means that a lot of children are out there without dad. So those of us who have the capacity to go beyond our own biological children, please do. It might be fathering your sister's children. It might be fathering your friends' children because they're not there. What, it doesn't matter. Let's let's
Yes.
let's wrap let's wrap a circle of fatherhood around the children in our community, and
Yes.
make sure that they know that we have them. And moms, this thing that we learned in Canada where people are telling other people, don't talk to my child in that. Listen,
Stop it.
that is the undoing of ourselves, right? So I'm saying we all have to be in agreement with that. I'm not
Say
saying
that
to
again,
abuse
Kwame.
any
Say
children.
that part again.
That's
Say
what
that part again. I think mothers, they need to hear it.
moms, the children are not a personal possession. Okay,
Hey,
they belong to our community. And so if there are people in the community who can help you to parent your child, allow that to happen. Be selective. We want to have positive people doing that. But I'm saying the idea of people saying to other, don't talk to my child, don't correct my son if he does something wrong, etc. That is
Bullshit.
folly. Okay,
Bullshit.
that is folly, and it's not the way we got out of enslavement through the journey we've had in the last 200 years into what you see today. It is not how we got there. The way we got there is that anybody on my street in Monrepo, when I'm coming home from school and I'm racing that boat in the canal, and my grandmother already told me not to do that, by the time I got home,
yes,
about 4 grandmothers have already scolded me for racing that boat. And they're
yes,
telling me to, I'm after I scold you, I'm still gonna call your grandmother and tell she too. So what I'm saying is this is how we wrap our love around the children in our community. It is a serious commitment. We must be committed and involved, right? Not everybody's like me. I have 25 or so children. But even if you have two more in addition to the ones you own or the ones you help to produce, that's good, right? But let's figure out how we can wrap our love around the children in our community. So when Father's Day come, it's not just about us and our immediate family. It's
yes,
about parenting. It's about parenting the children in our community, right?
Agreed.
What are you doing for that boy that you see who is talented? You're watching him, you met him, he's really talented, and he doesn't have the support because maybe you understand mathematics, but nobody else in his immediate family really understands that he's
yes,
gifted at it. What do? You got to jump in there. You have to say, ma'am, you know what? I recognize your son is very talented. Here's what I can do to help him. Let me introduce him to this opportunity. Let's get him with some of these organizations that will have a curriculum for somebody like him. I'm doing that all the time. So what I'm saying is what I'm living. Okay, so that's my message.
I love that message. I think everybody loves that message because whether you are co parenting in a house together, you're a single parent, you're separated, you always need the village because we have to complement each other and we don't always all have the skills. And, before I remember that, and Joan is totally in agreement 100%. You're home. Before you get home, everybody know what you did, and people will call you the disciplinarian or whatever else, but if we don't raise our children together as a unit in the village mentality, this is why we have children doing whatever they want because they know they're not accountable to anybody. So that's the parenting show. Oh Lord, we making shows out of this show. Anybody have a sponsor who wants to sponsor the Victory Speak show? Because we need to have this conversation about fathers. I'm telling you, this is like I thought it was a 4-part series, but I think it's like a 20-part series now because we had question number 4. Just saying, right? Just saying. So, Dwayne, what would you have to share? What is your message as we gently start wrapping up this conversation?
Well, I want to remind not only fathers, but as Kwame rightly said, it's always important to bring in mothers of two things. One, that as we're growing daughters, the Black woman is the most maligned person in our society, generally speaking. The Black woman is the most maligned person in our society. So when growing girls, it's important to remember that, generally speaking, the father is the first person the girl falls in love with, and to keep that in mind. So many blended families, the family units changes. We find that mothers keep daughters and sons away from their fathers, not understanding the vital importance of having the father, whether a biological father or not, like Kwame alluded to, in the life. And when a Black woman is maligned in childhood, she grows up with what many know as the father complex. And that
Mm.
creates problems for her in later years. And what happens is that the young man who is brought up in a less than ideal situation preys upon that young woman who has that father complex. But I'm looking at your time and I'll move on to the sons. The Black man is perhaps the most misunderstood person in our current society. Uh, Systemic and systematic racism exists in reality for one reason and one reason only: a misunderstanding of who the Black man really is, in my opinion. And so when the Black man is misunderstood from as early as a tween, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, and that grows up with him, uh, we see the school to prison pipeline being fueled again and again and again. And so it is important that fathers, whether biological or surrogate fathers, remember that boys and young men are watching us to determine how can I be. Because what has happened is that as society evolves and we pour more into girls and women, as we should, how often do we see boys being poured into? We teach girls to be strong and also to be soft, but how often do we teach boys to also be soft? And so we have this misbalance where this imbalance rather, where we see girls being elevated in society, and rightfully so, but not so much boys. So we have to find this balance with our boys and our girls as we strive to build the village, understanding that one, the Black woman is perhaps the most maligned person in society, and the Black man is perhaps the most misunderstood person in society.
Woo! You open up the next part of the conversation. Oh my God, how I end an issue? I don't even know at this point in time, because you went into some meat here, and if anybody in for the part, the next part of the show, you let me know, because we will bring back these amazing men. And I lied to myself. I have one more thing I must say. It's Father's Day on Sunday, and so Anthony, Anton, Kwame, and Dwayne, you have 1 minute or so to give a message to fathers out there, that whichever message is in your heart, what is your message in particularly to Black fathers out there? So we'll go in alphabetical order to make life easy, right? Anton James.
The one thing is, you matter. You matter, and what you do, you're responsible for these little ones, man. And your influence can change, make or break an individual. That regardless of what they're told, and regardless of the adversities, and regardless of the challenges, because raising kids aren't easy, it's worth it. It's worth it. And no matter what, don't give up. Regardless of the obstacle, regardless of what challenge you have with your partner, listen, stick through it, because you can change their trajectory. You want to have the one to realign their vision. There's a psychological study that actually shows that the fathers, I know, I think of 20 seconds left, the fathers have more influence in certain aspects on the trajectory of their life, in putting value and esteem into that child. So just knowing within that, you one can make the break, whether your son can go through. Love your child, love your son, love your daughter, communicate. Love doesn't, and don't be afraid to sit down there. I think um, Pastor said it real quick. I love when I kiss my son, and I love when I kiss my daughter. Love them both. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Anton. Mr. Anthony Pierre, the one
Yes.
who has influenced Quammie Williams in his parenting. Hey, come on now.
So I underscore completely what Anton has said. It's so critical. And I would go back to what I said originally in terms of my relationship with my daughter. The key to life is with children, between husband and wife, is communication. We have to build a relationship with your partner, your partner in the house, the wife or husband, and you have to learn to communicate with that person. You have to cut through, even when you lock horns and things are breaking down and stuff. You have to be able to pull yourself out of that and go, okay, you know what? Let's sit down and talk this out. It's all about, to me, it's all about being rational and developing a relationship of trust with each other. You have to develop a relationship of trust with your children. There's no other way. They will go through so much, especially in a society like this, where they're undervalued and looked down on and so on. And there's that 1/3 of the society that wants to lift themselves by pushing you down. You need to have the relationship where that child can come and talk and trust you to talk through what they're going through, and that if even you can't solve it, at least the act of speaking and exchanging those ideas makes a difference. At least they have an outlet for some of their own frustration and so on. So to underscore what Anton said, 110%, and communication.
I love it.
Trust in communication.
Trust, communication, and no judgment. Loving your children without judgment, no matter what they say or do, you love them unconditionally. Pastor Dwayne Wellington Rattray, you're next. The message to the fathers today.
Fathers, if there's a secret to proper manhood and stable fatherhood, it is this: understand who you are. You need to understand who you are, not who society tells you, not what the statistics tell you, not what anyone else tells you. But when you do authentic self-searching and you realize who you are, you realize your vital importance, not only to your nuclear family, but to your community, to your biological children, to your surrogate children, and to everyone who is depending on you. And the interesting thing is that just as they are depending on you, you can depend on them. But it has to happen in a sense of authentic relationship. The problem too often with Black men in general is that you have been taught to shy away from your emotions. And so you don't want anybody to talk to you about this. You find yourself locked away. And so you find mental health issues coming up again and again because you have not found who you are deep down in your core. But if you can figure out who you are, if you can figure out who you were created to be, what you were created to do, then everything will flow from that. Because the fact of the matter is, whether or not it's politically correct, the loving man is the head of the family. And it is no accident that families get broken down when there are no fathers present. It is a deliberate action by society. It is a deliberate action sociologically. It is a deliberate action spiritually to remove fathers, because once you remove the father who doesn't understand who he is, then you can break down the family, you can break down a society, you can break down a people. And once those are broken down, then you can erase all of those things. So understand who you are and save an entire people.
Woo, that is a conversation. The separation of families, the breaking away. And I think this is where we will have that conversation about the history of the Black fathers and how Black fathers have been removed from since time. And the family unit has been broken down. We have been trying to build it up, and no matter what they have hit us with, Black men still have shown up strong and still show up as bright and as wonderful and as fantabulous as all of you. So, Dr. Rudy Quammie Williams, this is you. What is your message, your last message to fathers out there as we approach Father's Day?
Well, I want to begin by reaffirming what the three brothers have said, because I concur with what they've said as well. And what I would add to it is this: it is very important. I adopted a philosophy a long time ago when I was a very young man and just becoming actually even before my first biological child was born. And that is, wherever there are children in the household, the children must come first. The children must be put first. I tell this to people, even couples who, decide that they can't live together, that the most important thing and that what's going to get you to a positive path is to put the children first. Because every day we wake up and we make our decisions and we say, how does this affect my child? How does this affect the children in this household? We're going to be making the right, we're going to make certainly much better decisions. I'll tell you that, because that's how I've lived my life, and that has worked for me. And I know I've seen it work for other people too, because putting children first clears away the cobwebs, clears away all of those things that are really not that important, or certainly not the most important. Putting children first helps to prepare you for making decisions that are always going to be about the future of our families, the future of our communities, etc. So that is my parting message. Put the children first. And I don't only mean your biological children. If you're in a household with someone who has children, so you've inherited some children, the children have to be put first, even though they're not yours biologically. Any household that exists must put children in the household first, in the decision, in the strategies for the family moving forward. Consider the children first. What do they need in order for them to be healthy and nurtured? Right? We're moving to this area. Well, is this okay in terms of opportunities for schools, et cetera, et cetera? When I go, sometimes we have to make decisions for the economics, but if we make decisions for the economics that are driven by trying to make sure that the children have what they need, then those decisions are going to be well done. If we make decisions for economics instead of decisions that have to do with the children's betterment, we are going to, we're going, as a people anyway, we're certainly going to perish. We're going to have our difficult times, and we see that playing out in the society every day. So, the message here is make the children the central point, the focal point of your decision-making process, and work it out.
Woo. And with that, that's a basic wrap. And I just want to let you know what some of the people and some of the folks out there in Victory Speaks Land are saying. We need to play this again. Quite interesting. They love the conversation. I'm in it for the next part. I hope you guys are ready and strapped in. We got to bring them back. Please bring. I'm not saying this. They're saying please bring them back. This was such an inspiration. And Serena is tuning in all the way from Washington D.C. Loris is, yes, we must do this again. Shirley Joseph, who is a veteran, is loving all this super fatherhood power in this discussion. And so, this one, it says it, fire, 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 the round of applause. And, I thank each and every one of you, Kwame, Anton, Anthony, and Dwayne, for coming on to the show tonight. It has been truly a pleasure. I am honored. I am humbled. I am trying not to cry tonight. I'm the emotional one. And for all of you who tuned in live and on the replay, if you have friends and family who missed the show, please share it with them. Let them know why they should listen to it. For me, it's not about the numbers, it's about the content, it's about the quality of the show, it's about the conversation, because we want to make sure that we change and affect lives. We have amazing men being fathers in our society. And I'll tell you something, I'm going to bring these men back up to the stage. Please, on Father's Day, I beg you, please, don't wish me happy Father's Day. Don't wish me happy Father's Day on Father's Day. I cannot be a father. I will not be a father. I am a mom. And we have to, even if fathers are not in the lives of your children, please honor the men. Please honor the men that are showing up, that are doing their job. And whether it's and women, and I'm going to say this with the men on the line, do not weaponize your children against the fathers. If your relationship is not working with the fathers, unless they're physically abusive and they're emotionally abusive, not by your headspace, but by truth. Stop weaponizing the children. We need fathers in the lives of our sons and daughters. There are too many children walking around hurt and broken. And for those of you, and as it's Father's Day and your father is not here with you, remember the memories, celebrate what your fathers have instilled in you. We got lots of value and wisdom from our fathers tonight of how the foundation is key. And Kwame brought it home by saying, when you put the children first, there is so much that we can from get from one another. If you want to watch the show one more time, you can tune into it on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube page. There is a Victory Speaks YouTube page at Victory Speaks 7. Tune in, tune in, tune in. Next week we're going to have some great shows for you. And and even down at the end of the month, that little trailer I showed you, we're going to have Tristan Barrickson on the end of the month. But stay tuned to Victory Speaks, to the Facebook page. You'll find out what we're doing, who's coming on next. There is the audio podcast that's on Spotify and on Apple. And Albert Pike says, what we do for ourselves dies with us, and what we do for others lives forever. Remember, love is in the details. Smile with someone today. Have an inspired conversation. Be sure to pick up the Calabash album. And remember to show these fathers some love. I'm going to bring them back. Show them your love. Give them your hearts. Give them your applause. I'm giving them some applause. I'm changing the song. Woo! I'm going to show you just a couple of comments before we go out. We must honor our dads. And tonight, dads, we honor you. I give you your flowers. And I thank you all for coming on to the show tonight. Be blessed and take care.